Hello everyone. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Sarah Descamps and I work in the Educational Engineering and Digital Education Service at the University of Mons in Belgium. Our service is particularly interested in digital skills for all audiences, and today we are going to focus on those of teachers. You may have already found yourself in this situation, or maybe you've been asked to integrate digital technology into your courses, but you don't know where to start. Or perhaps you want to track your students' progress more effectively while also making your classes more interactive. But these new teaching practices require certain skills, and that's where Descamps comes in. So this reference framework was developed by the European Commission, and it clearly defines digital competencies for education professionals. In this video, I will introduce you to these different areas and competencies, and above all, show you concrete examples specifically designed for higher education. Descamps is actually a specific adaptation of Descamps, the European reference framework for citizens' digital competencies. We'll talk more about Descamps in detail in an upcoming video. But in summary, these two frameworks share a common goal, supporting the digital transition by identifying the essential skills to develop in an increasingly connected society. Descamps was launched in 2013, and since then it has been regularly updated with the latest version, Descamps 2.2, released in 2022. Descamps and Descamps are part of a family of competency frameworks developed by the European Commission. For example, there is also GreenCamp for skills related to sustainable development and EntreCamp for skills related to entrepreneurship. Descamps, published in 2017, is aimed specifically at education professionals. Its goal is to help teachers, trainers, and every education stakeholder to integrate digital technologies into their teaching practices, while also developing their own digital literacy. We're going to talk about digital skills, but in the end, what exactly is a digital skill? It's not just about knowing how to use a piece of software or a digital tool. According to the European Commission, a digital skill is the confident, critical, and responsible use and engagement with digital technologies for learning, work, and participation in society. In other words, it's not just about technical mastery of digital tools, but rather a set of knowledge, know-how, and attitudes. This includes technical aspects, of course, but also critical, collaborative, and ethical dimensions. All of these are essential for navigating effectively in a digital society. For a teacher, this could mean choosing the right tools, creating appropriate content, collaborating, communicating effectively, or even assessing and supporting learning in a responsible and critical way. Let's take a concrete example, a teacher who creates an interactive quiz on Moodle. For instance, to promote active learning among their students, they are already drawing on several of their digital skills at once. Instructional design, the creation of digital resources, and even the assessment of learning. The Descamps framework identifies 6 major areas of competence. It covers the entire spectrum of teaching activities, from professional engagement to the development of learners' digital skills, including the use of digital resources, teaching, learning, assessment, and also supporting students. A progression of 6 mastery levels is also offered, ranging from beginner to pioneer. This gradation allows each teacher to see where they stand, but also to assess their progress and gradually develop their digital expertise. In the rest of this video, I suggest we explore these 6 areas together, each time with a concrete example specific to higher education. Let's start with the first area of competence, professional engagement. To introduce this area, imagine the following situation. You have to coordinate an educational project with several colleagues remotely, but how do you communicate effectively? How do you share your resources without losing them in emails? Well, that's exactly what Descamps groups under the area of professional engagement. This area includes four main competencies. The first is organizational communication. This means that education professionals must be able to use digital technologies to improve communication within their institution, whether it's with students, colleagues, or even external partners or students' parents. For example, using a platform like Teams to communicate smoothly with colleagues and students. Instead of sending countless emails, this is a perfect example of this competency. The second competency is professional collaboration. Here, it's about working together online. Co-creating educational content or course modules, for example, by writing a shared syllabus on a collaborative document or building an interactive resource together through a collaborative platform. The third competency is reflective practice. It's the ability to step back and reflect on one's own digital practices, either individually or as a team, to identify what works well, what could be improved, or how to adapt one's practice to the context of their institution. And finally, the fourth competency of professional engagement is ongoing professional development in digital technology. In fact, digital technology is a world that evolves very quickly, and we've seen this recently with the arrival of artificial intelligence. It requires us to regularly up to date. This competency therefore involves staying informed, regularly training oneself on new tools and new pedagogical approaches in order to continue enriching one's professional and teaching practice. Now let's move on to the second area of competency, digital resources. Today, given the multitude of educational resources available, this area focuses on the management and creation of digital content, from selection to dissemination. It consists of three main competencies. The first is the selection of digital resources. Here, the idea is to be able to identify, evaluate, and choose the right resources for teaching, depending on the learning objectives. For example, a teacher might choose an interactive simulation for a physics class or a collection of scientific articles for a research seminar. The second competency is the creation or modification of digital resources. Here, it's not just about producing content, but also about designing resources that are suited to the context, the learning objective, or a specific teaching approach. For example, this could involve creating an explanatory video, a podcast, an interactive quiz, or a serious game to make concepts more concrete. Here's a concrete example, English Quest by Pauline Burney. She is an English teacher who created a video game to help her students learn English. Finally, the third competency is managing and sharing your resources. Once the content is created, you need to know how to distribute it properly while respecting privacy rules, copyright, and open licensing. For example, knowing the different types of Creative Commons licenses. As illustrated here, this allows you to share your creations on Moodle, within an institutional deployment, or on an open platform, all while respecting the rights associated with each resource. Let's take a concrete example. If I go back to the example of the teacher who created her video game to teach English, she had to choose a license and a method of distribution. With the emergence of artificial intelligence, and thus the arrival of new digital skills, this field has evolved significantly. Teachers now need to be able to understand how to use generative artificial intelligence tools to develop and personalize teaching materials, as well as to evaluate the quality of content generated by AI. Now let's move on to the third area of Descamps, teaching and learning. This area focuses on how digital technologies can support, enrich, and transform teaching practices. It includes 4 key competencies. The first competency, teaching. Here, it involves planning and implementing digital tools in the teaching process to make pedagogical interventions more effective and engaging. For example, an economics teacher can design a hybrid course by alternating between explanatory video clips and in-person sessions dedicated to solving practical cases. This competency also includes the idea of experimenting with new formats, such as flipped classrooms or project-based learning. In this video, you are also experiencing this type of teaching with video clips and activities that take place remotely. The second competency in this area is guidance. Here we're talking about using technology to better support learners, whether during class or outside of class. For example, a teacher can use Teams to answer students' questions, create a space for discussion, or offer individual online appointments for personalized follow-up. Another example is a thesis supervisor. They can use a shared collaborative document to comment live on students' work, while leaving a clear, written record of their feedback. These practices make support more responsive and individualized. The third skill in this teaching and learning domain is collaborative learning. The idea here is to encourage collaboration among students through digital tools. For example, a teacher can ask their students to co-construct an online concept map. These activities not only develop disciplinary skills, but also the ability to collaborate and communicate effectively and appropriately. Finally, the fourth skill is self-regulated learning. Here it's about using digital tools to help students become more independent in their learning. For example, a teacher can offer assessment quizzes on a platform like Moodle, which allows students to evaluate their progress at their own pace. Other teachers create digital portfolios where students document their learning, achievements, and reflections. Throughout the semester, we can also encourage the use of applications like Trello to plan work and track learning goals. The fourth area of Descamps concerns an essential aspect of our teaching profession, assessment. Digital technology is profoundly transforming the way we assess learning, collect evidence, and provide feedback to students. This area encompasses 3 digital competencies. Let's start with the first competency in this area, the ability to apply assessment strategies. Today, digital technology allows us to go far beyond the traditional exam. For example, a teacher can use a tool like WooClap to conduct formative assessments with polls and quizzes throughout the course. Short quizzes like these make it possible to check understanding in real time and adjust the learning pace. The idea is to diversify assessment methods to better match learning objectives. Next comes the competency of analyzing evidence. Here, we're talking about the ability to interpret data from the digital environment to better understand learning. For example, a teacher can review activity statistics on Moodle to identify which students are struggling or which content is causing problems, through quiz responses, for instance. So it's not just about collecting data, but about critically reading digital traces to inform pedagogical decisions. Finally, the third skill related to assessment concerns feedback and planning. Providing quick, targeted, and constructive feedback is one of the major advantages of digital technology. For example, with tools like Moodle or Teams, it's possible to leave a personalized comment, which is much more engaging than just a numerical grade. And then, this data makes it possible to plan the next steps in teaching, offer remediation resources, for example, reorganize a session to re-explain a concept, or direct certain students towards specific support. Once again, the emergence of generative artificial intelligence has changed this area of digital skills. For example, teachers may be able to use automated grading systems that leverage artificial intelligence to assess students' progress or provide specific feedback. And now we come to the second to last domain of Descamps, which is called empowerment. This domain focuses on how digital technology can make learning more inclusive, more personalized, and more engaging. Here as well, it encompasses three main competencies. Let's start with the first competency, accessibility and inclusivity. Here, the goal is to ensure that all students, regardless of their needs, abilities, or constraints, can fully access learning resources and activities. For example, a teacher who makes sure to add subtitles to their videos for hearing impaired individuals or who chooses to, using color contrast suitable for colorblind individuals, fully applies this competency. But inclusion also means taking the digital divide into account and understanding the diverse digital profiles of students in terms of digital skills. Some are very comfortable with digital tools, while others are much less so. So it's about adapting. The second competency in this area is differentiation and personalization. Digital technology now offers many possibilities to adapt teaching to individual needs. For example, with platforms like Google Classroom that you use or Moodle, a teacher can create differentiated learning paths where each student progresses at their own pace with resources or activities they unlock, depending on their previous results. These practices allow students to have more control over their learning while still providing targeted support. Finally, the third skill is the ability to actively engage learners. Here, the question to answer is the following. How can digital technology help make students active participants in their own learning? For example, in a science class, students can be asked to collect and analyze their own data using digital tools. Or in another class, such as communication, to create a podcast or a short video to explain a complex concept in simple terms. This type of approach encourages both creativity and critical thinking, as well as anchoring learning in the real world. Finally, the sixth and last area of the Descamps Edu framework concerns the development of digital skills in learners. How can we help our learners develop specific digital skills? In other words, it's no longer just about teachers' digital skills, but about our role as educators in helping students themselves become responsible, critical, and creative users of digital technology. This area is particularly rich, which is why it deserves a more in-depth look. So, there will be a video dedicated to digital skills for learners and citizens. Thank you very much for your listening and attention. We'll see each other in the next video where we'll talk about citizens' digital skills with the Descamps.